my friend Purushottam Singh Thakur. A warm welcome to all of you and all the people who have joined so far. This session is very relevant in the current times, considering the fact that we are all set and geared up to handle one of the most sensitive shipments of all time, the vaccine shipment. As part of Air Cargo Forum India, our association at Hyderabad, we have always been trying to improve the trade movement from Hyderabad. We're trying to educate, generate awareness about the key trends and key aspects that we all need to be aware of. And we are also trying to address and make Hyderabad a great place for doing the air cargo business together. Under our initiatives, I think there are 2 to 3 more focus areas. One of them happens to be training and development. And this webinar today comes under that pillar. In addition to this, we are also working towards improving the ease of doing business, as well as taking up industry issues and addressing them as part of the ACFI Hyderabad. Coming to vaccine, we are all very lucky to be having this experience of going to be, in a place which is the hub for vaccine manufacturing globally. Some of you may be aware, but for all of us, Hyderabad is one of the largest vaccine producing regions globally, especially when it comes to COVID-19 vaccine. Not one, but there are almost half a dozen potential candidates which are being developed as we are speaking. Some of them are already shipping it from Hyderabad, but most of the other people are also developing this vaccine in various forms to be shipped out of Hyderabad by air over the next 1 to 2 years. So this webinar, as we is very well timed, and we all thought that this is one thing that we all should come together and discuss and deliberate and generate awareness as to what this issue, what this challenge is like, how we can jointly address this challenge, and most importantly, Hyderabad is, and how do we make sure that Hyderabad will be and always will ensure one of the best service levels and facilities for handling this sensitive shipments as we go ahead. So with these a few introductory words, I hand it back to Purushottam. And yes, for all the viewers, I also want to say that Air Cargo Forum India Hyderabad chapter, which started last year, we have plans of making it big, involving all of you as much as possible, and we will have many more sessions like this to exchange knowledge and ensure that Hyderabad emerges as a major air cargo hub for India. So thanks, Purushottam, and thanks, Kiran, for helping us with this initiative. Over to you, Puru.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Saurabh, for your encouraging words and the setting the context. And this is so important information which we will be getting out from the eminent panelists and the speakers during the next 2 hours. So I would like to now basically introduce our eminent panelist who will be talking on the vaccine handling procedures and the best practices from the airline perspective, what actually it is required. It is none other Mr. Laurence Jacobi, who has been in airline industry for over 35 years, which 25 years he has been associated with the air cargo industry. So he has a lot of rich experience on the pharma vertical, on the cargo ecosystem. So he will be basically speaking on the airline's perspective on vaccine handling, what kind of a processes, what is that need today we need to make aware the shippers, the freight forwarding communities, which is required by the airline perspective. So I would like to welcome Mr. Laurence Jacobi to take us through on the airline's perspective on vaccine handling. So handing over to Mr. Laurence.
Thanks, Puru. Thank you for your introduction. Thanks, Kiran, Kamal, Saurabh, and everyone of you who have worked so closely in coordination to get this going today. And thanks, Ishika, for putting up the slide. So I would just like to tell you that I've split this very small presentation into two components. One is the general perspective and one specifically an airline perspective. I know we have a mixed crowd of people from the freight forwarding industry and from other parts of the industry, but all within the air cargo trade. So I thought it's best I split it into two portions, one which is a general perspective and an overview, and one very, very specific to what an airline does. Ishika, if you could just highlight the first slide, please. Just play the first slide, yeah, the text. Okay, doesn't matter. I am sure by now all of us are Google doctors, WhatsApp doctors, virologists, pulmonary experts, COVID experts. Most of this information that we garner from the social media may not be as accurate as possible, may be misleading, may be good, may be valuable as well. But for us in the air cargo trade, there's no ifs and buts. We either get it right the first time or we are in trouble. Remember, the first thing we need to know is what our capabilities are. This is not a commodity that's nut and bolt, or is it a computer piece or any general cargo. This is something that's saving human lives. And every one of us need to take on that responsibility very, very seriously. So the first point that I mentioned is know your capability. You must be wondering why I mentioned that. Before I accept to take on transportation of vaccine, irrespective of whether I am a trucker, a freight forwarder, a cargo agent, I'm a shipper or a warehouse handler, I need to know what infrastructure I have, which is suitable or not suitable to handle these vaccine shipments. The infrastructure basically means the equipment, the storage space or the temperature controlled area. Do I have the suitable manpower? Here's a place where you need to also ask yourself a question is, do I have the right regulatory authorization, permissions, or qualifications? Am I GDP compliant? Now, this dealing with health, we need to have good distribution practice and good storage practices. Okay. We also need to know whether our hours of operation coincide with that of the shipment dispatch. IT communication capability. Do we have the capability of procuring, storing, or handling data loggers? Do we have interface? Do we have a possible replacement capability? The most important topic, which is hardly covered in these webinars on the vaccine, is the security. One of the biggest concerns the WHO has is the security. If there's no proper security for these vaccines, the chances of it getting into the hands of antisocial elements and the possible of counterfeiting is very, very, very high. To countries who are desperate to have this vaccine, these vaccines are highly invaluable. So that just the first point. We also need to understand our customers' requirements with respect to the vaccine. Do we have information about the product stability? Are we aware of the sensitivity? Do we know what packing is being used? Do we know what the most accurate type of labeling is as per IATA? What are the transportation requirements? Here I'd like to mention that most of us talk about vaccines. We know what a vaccine is all about. And we know that it helps us build up our immunity towards the virus that's infecting all of us. But do we know what delivery method the shipper plans for the final product? Is it to be an injection? Is it to be an oral drop? Is it to be a nasal spray? Or, for example, just to give you an example for you to think a little further, have we discussed with the shipper, is it going to be sterile water and a powder that will be transported separately? Or is it a vaccine preloaded into a syringe? Or is it going to be into a vial? In our discussions with the customers, we need to obtain all this information. We can't rely on information that we had garnered from the last few years. All these years, we have not handled vaccines specifically designed for handling COVID. We've handled multiple vaccines. We've handled vaccines to all parts of the world. I mean, We've handled veterinary vaccines and we've handled vaccines for human use. But sorry, one second. You can see my screen. Just a minute. Ishika, can you put the slide on full screen, please? If it's possible. If not, it's okay. It doesn't matter.
She's putting
the font
it.
Slightly small. Not a problem. Not a problem. Let's get back to second point. Understand the customer's requirements. Yes. Does the customer have any very specific requirements? Customers will, at this point of time, it's also good to discuss with your customers what level of transparency do they want, what level of tracking they want, what kind of information do they want. Most shippers are interested in specific information and they don't want a whole download of information that doesn't concern them. They don't want to know if Mr. Kupusamy from the trucking company signed a document and handed over to Mr. X in GMR. They specifically want to know whether the temperature was maintained in the truck. And are we going to share that data? We need to discuss with our customers as to what they require. If I'm speaking from a general perspective as a freight forwarder or a shipper or as a clearing agent, and I've taken on the responsibility of transporting these vaccines, I need to keep all the stakeholders in the loop. Here we suggest that it must be a joint meeting. Normally our meetings are one-on-one, either with the freight forwarder and the shipper. Sorry, Kiran, I hope I'm not boring you.
No, sir,
or the shipper and the airline, or the shipper and the cargo handling agent at the airport, but it should involve every one of us. When we all sit together, there's a lot of information that each one of us has from our own domains, which is our strength. So we would suggest that a joint meeting is conducted with all the stakeholders well before planning even a trial shipment. Communication and shipment tracking is another very, very important aspect of the transportation of vaccines, irrespective of whether it's COVID or not. Some airports in the world do have gateways for transmitting data loggers. This is something that we need to discuss with the shippers to what type of data loggers they are going to use. And we should be in a position to share with the shipper that there are various options of data loggers that are available, either transmitting or passive data loggers. And if they want a continuous flow of information, then what transmitting type of data loggers is acceptable by all stakeholders, including an airline. An airline may or may not accept certain transmitting data loggers. Each airline will probably update or share that information with the trade, saying that we accept the XYZ data loggers and you can work with them. Some of the ports do have gateways which can interface with these data loggers to capture the data, move it into a cloud where the customer can go to access his account from the cloud and view the exact tracking, the temperature, the humidity of his shipment throughout the supply chain. The next thing we need to do is actually get on to details, discuss and agree a detailed, practical, workable SOP. Every single one of these steps needs to be documented. If it is, let us say, shipper X, then in shipper X, which department and in which department, which representatives or shippers representatives are going to hand over the shipment to the next supply chain partner. Is that going to be documented? That must be documented. Then if the freight forwarder is using a trucker who's picking up the cargo, which representatives are picking up the cargo and what condition and what documentation is maintained. Throughout the supply chain, there must be a continuous documentation of not only the temperature of the cargo, it's also the condition of the cargo. Or if any incident happened, it should be logged. I just give you an example. We went through a very exhaustive SOP with a particular shipper and as an airline with a freight forwarder. And it took us so many drafts to get all the facts aligned correctly. It is an exhaustive work. So we need to start this at least a month before the actual vaccine shipment is physically transported from A to B. It's also highly recommended that you conduct a dry run or a mock trial of the shipment. When we created this SOP, the original SOP, the customer agreed that we would transport the identical vaccine packages, but the packages would contain distilled water. They would monitor not just every milestone, they would monitor every 15 minutes or 20 minutes as to the temperature of the cargo, its geographical location, wherever it was in the supply chain, and in whose custody it was. The SOP also includes a contingency plan. Every stakeholder must have a contingency plan for any events that are not planned for. If there's a breakdown of the process, then what is the process to be followed? Who will take responsibility and ownership for that event, and how will it be handled? Every single one of these points need to be included in the SOP. Before I go to the second half of the presentation, Purushottam, am I good for time, or do you have a few more minutes?
Yeah. Laurence, please go ahead.
Yeah, you can go ahead. You can go ahead.
Okay. This is as far as the general trade is concerned, including freight forwarder, clearance agent, freight customs custodian, or any one of us in the supply chain. As an airline, as Emirates Airlines, what did we do? Well, in August 2020, we decided that we would use DWC. We have two airports in Dubai. One is Dubai DXB, and one is DWC, which is in the Freeport area, Jebel Ali Freeport area. That has been designated as our vaccine handling center. So can you just move to the next slide, Ishika, please? Yeah, this is what we decided to do. We would have a separate global distribution hub. Yeah, you can just go to the next slide, please. Ishika, can you go to the next slide, please? Yeah. So this is what we plan to. Yeah, go back to the previous slide, please. Ishika, can you go back to the previous slide, please? Yes. Yeah, just hold that slide for a second. What is unique about DWC? It has a cross-dock facility in Jebel Ali, where the palletized cargo can come straight from a truck and get onto the airside. It goes through an X-ray machine. It either comes from Dubai on a passenger flight, and all our freighters are based in DWC. So there is hardly any interaction in the warehouse. So they can come straight from a truck, get into the warehouse, and onto a flight. The entire facility is GDP certified and temperature controlled. An integrated solution as part of the airport-to-airport air freight offering. This is what we do from airport to airport. We have an airport called Dubai, which is in the city central, and DWC, which is far away. We connect both the airports with the temperature control trucking, which is monitored by Dubai Police, the Customs Department, and the airline. Can we go to the next slide, please? Okay. The reason why I think airports in this particular area are extremely important to the world. I'm not sure if you all are aware, but India has produced almost 60% of the world's vaccines are produced in India. The second WHO approved vaccine manufacturing unit was in Hyderabad, which was Shanta Biotech, the first one being Serum Institute in Bombay. Between both Serum and Hyderabad's biotech companies, we produce 60% of the world's vaccines. And if you look at the circles mentioned in this slide, you will find that within just 3 hours of flying, we covered probably the 2 billion people within 3 hours of flying. Two of the world's largest populations, China and India, are well within the coverage range of maybe a 6 hours flight. So Emirates connects these huge populations together, which is probably the biggest requirement that we have. What is not mentioned here to the left is Area 1, which is extremely well connected from Dubai and from many other places, which reduces the transit time and reduces the throughput. Can we go to the next slide, please? Can we enlarge it slightly? Okay, doesn't matter. This is what we do in DWC. The print is very small. I'm not sure if everyone can see the slide, but the area is 4,000 meters capacity. This is totally temperature controlled. You'll see we have truck docks on both the sides. And on the air side, you have the freighters. We have areas which have 70 to 72 cool cells, which is 2 to 8 degrees. And you have probably the same mirror image on the other side, which is 15 to 25. The idea of mentioning this particular area is that any cargo can be built up or broken down, deconsolidated or consolidated within this facility, within the temperature required for a shipment like a vaccine. Can you go to the next slide, please? Okay, what is this cross dock? If you look here, you will find that we have passive and passive containers, passive active containers that move to Dubai, which is probably the biggest requirement for all airlines and for all shippers right now and during this current condition. You will find that these units can freely flow from the land side onto the air side. Built up units, the X-ray screening machines are capable of handling the biggest units that we have. The entire unit or the DWC, like I mentioned earlier, is GDP certified, including this process of cross-docking, which means even the truck process and the management of the trucking is also part of the GDP process. Can you go to the next slide, please? Okay, these are some very specific details that we have, but it's good to see that the kind of technology that is used in big hubs like Dubai, you have 72 cool cells allowing for 1,728 pallet locations long term. I'm not sure how many pallets long term we can store in Hyderabad. It's definitely not the same amount, but you can imagine 1,728 pallets is a huge amount. You have 5 cold chain chambers, that's 2 to 8 and 15 to 25, with 2,800 pallet locations for short-term transit. Here is an interesting point: staging area for handling and value addition of vaccine. Way back in August in 2020, we decided that in this warehouse we would offer facilities for re-icing, recharging of cool gel packs, or if the customer wanted to build or break or relabel or deconsolidate entire shipment and say, okay, I've got this huge shipment of 50 tons arriving into your warehouse. I need to send 3 tons to so-and-so place and 2 to this place, but I need to re-ice them, or I need to recharge the gel packs. We have service providers who provide all these things within the warehouse and within the periphery of the warehouse, so that at no point of time is the cargo kept in a vulnerable situation. Re-icing is mentioned here. This location in DWC is unique in the sense that it also connects ocean and air. At this point of time, ocean is not very important because the transit for vaccine is very, very short. Yeah, can you go to the next slide, please? The distance between the 2 airports is 77 kilometers. Like I said, we have a truck. You can see the timelines, just very, very, very simple. From arrival into Dubai, within 2 hours, it should get onto a flight within Dubai itself. But if it's going to DWC, within 5 hours, it should be airborne. These are the timelines that we have set for ourselves. And these are the KPIs that we follow very, very, very closely. Yeah, can you go to the next slide, please? Okay. Some of these units are very common to you. Some may not be common to everyone. But Emirates has agreements with every one of the vendors for these active passive units. You will find CSAFE, Docash, SkyCell, Envirotainer. We as a trade need to also educate a shipper whose core function is actually manufacturing. It is not into transportation, as to the most suitable type of unit for the destination that they've chosen and for the type of product that they have. We need to be very careful. In case we are not aware, any one of the supply chain partners can always contact the airline, or they can contact the vendor directly for further technical information, which we need to share with the shipper for him to know the capability of these units. Yeah, can we go to the next slide, please? Shika, can we go to the next slide, please? Yeah, this is an old network map taken in January this year. After COVID, we barely had any flights, maybe just 3 or 4 or 5 starting April, beginning 2020. Well, we've grown this network, and as of today, we have a destination count of 136. So this covers the entire, probably the entire globe where vaccines are required. And I think that's it. Can we have the next slide, please? Yeah, this is just a snapshot of the infrastructure that we have in Dubai to handle vaccine. You can see the thermal covers, you can see the cool cells on the bottom left corner, you can see the cool dollies at the aircraft inside of the freighter, and most of it is automated. It's just a quick snapshot just to show you what we do in an airline hub. That's it from my side. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to take them. Or Puru, if you would like to collect them later, it's up to you.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Laurence, and hope I'm audible now, clear, Kiran, or else you want me to close the video?
No, you're clear right now.
Okay.
If there's any technical glitch, we'll let you know.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Laurence. I think this was wonderful insights which you have clarified between the generic requirements and the airline requirements. I think wonderful to know, and I think a lot of things you have covered which are very much required for the entire logistics supply chain of this life-saving drug COVID-19 vaccines, out of which you touched upon the infra, you touched upon IoT of things, plus other things on the processes and procedures and the requirement. But I think there is something which is which I think the audience would like to also know on the security protocols which you mentioned. I think what should be the security protocols, or how the airline adopting any new methodology of the security protocols for these particular vaccines. I think if you can throw some light on that security point, as well as you also talked about one of the best thing and the technology on the data loggers. Maybe I think something like you also mentioned on the digital data loggers. I think that will give you the entire visibility, traceability, and trackability, wherein the people can have at least control where if there are any excursions or any kind of a malfunction happens. So maybe on these 2 points, if you can just throw some light for the audience sake, and then if there are any question answers, we can take it up in the question answer session.
Thanks, Guru. One quick answer is our security protocol is something that is confidential, that we cannot share right now because that's within the airline group. But please be assured that the airline security starts right from the moment it leaves the shipper's facility. The airline itself will be monitoring a lot of this, and how we will do it. Yes, there are some modalities to be worked out, which we will share with the on a need-to-know basis, because security is not something that you're going to put out in a newspaper and say this is my security protocol. We obviously, the less people that know about it, the better. I hope I didn't directly answer your question, but that's the current situation. About these digital data loggers, Emirates as an airline has shared with the trade all the type of data loggers that we'll accept on our flight. The idea is to be as transparent as possible, so the shipper doesn't have to go shopping or look for technical data to suit his requirement. Is there any other question that you would like me to answer?
Yeah. Thank you so much, Mr. Laurence. I think it was great to know all the insights, and maybe on the security, yes, definitely it is there. But anything additional security protocol we could adopt. I think that's the reason why I think WHO was also talking about. So I think you have given the right answer for the audience. And thank you so much, sir. And I think we will just move on to the next panelist, which is very important in supply chain of vaccines. Everything is coming, manufacturing, quality check done, the supply chain. When it comes to the cross borders, the vaccines have to be cleared. They need to go with certain protocols. So I would like to now bring in on board Mr. Kamal Jain, Director Cargomen Logistics, who will be speaking on the freight forwarding, the CHA perspective, and the other supply chain requirements, which is a must for these vaccines. Plus, what are the challenges? What is that from the forwarding perspective? Also, they would like to bring in some improvements. And over and above, just to introduce Mr. Kamal Jain, he's the director for the Cargomen Logistics. He has a very rich experience in the clearing and forwarding, basically at Hyderabad and all over India also. And plus, abroad also, they have their branches. Plus, he's also more on a very energetic to improve the Hyderabad station, and he's very active member in all the forums. So, and on the customs clearance part, he's one of the best experienced logistic person to give our audience a lot of information on this, how the vaccines, what are the requirements and what are the processes. And he can also suggest what is that, how can we curtail these processing times into 50% so that the hibernation for these vaccines will be lesser time. So I would like to introduce and welcome Mr. Kamal Jain. Over to you.
Thank you, Purushottam, for wonderful introduction. And I would like to thank ACFI Hyderabad chapter and Gubba Pharma Cold Storage Private Limited for giving me the opportunity to express my views as a service provider about the vaccine handling. All of you are aware, India is the biggest supplier and manufacturer of vaccine. And in this pandemic, the whole world is looking toward us for the supplies. And such situation, our responsibility is increases, and hence the vaccine handling information and related protocols, related information, guidelines become an important part of our logistics industry and supply chain. So as a logistics service provider, the responsibility is immense because you are the people who is the first hand handling the clients, understanding their needs, and aligning the other component of the supply chain. Be it the carrier, be it the custodian or regulators, everywhere a service provider, whether it's a freight forwarder or a CHA, attend to them, understand their need, and providing the first-hand information to the client, and whatever client has given or the shipper or the producer provide, we submit to the authorities. And in such cases, responsibility increases. The whole objective of entire supply chain of vaccine is to maintain the efficacy and the integrity of the drug. Because if the efficacy and integrity is maintained, the very purpose of producing the drug is protecting us or human being from the from the disease. And if it is done properly, the work is done properly, and your responsibility toward the producer is done. The vaccine is has a different meaning and perspective for a different component of the supply chain, whether it's a carrier, custom, regulator, and other people. I'll just explain you what is the meaning and the perspective for them for the vaccine. I'll just share my PPT. Just a Kiranji, is it visible?
Yeah, it's visible.
Yes, sir. It was visible for a minute. Yeah, now it's visible.
It's with just a minute. It's visible.
It is visible.
Yeah. It's in the presentation mode. I'll just connect you again.
It was in the presentation mode. Now it's not. Like you just removed a second ago.
Just a minute. Let me.
I think, Mr. Kamal, your internet is weak, so you have to go off video.
Let me try again. It's fine now?
Yeah, it's fine now.
It is visible.
Yeah, it's fine now. It's perfectly right.
So when we say vaccine, from a custom point of view, this is a commodity which is classified under HSN 3002. So it is a commodity for them, a regular commodity. All the commodities which are traded in the world are classified from chapter 1 to 98, and it is one of them. And only requirement with this commodity is it requires clearance from a participating government agency known as CDSO. When it comes to the carrier, this is a dangerous goods of class 6.2 and demands certain type of documentation and activities to be performed. And when it comes to the custodian, it is a cargo which requires a specific temperature and a specific handling requirement or a pallet. For a user, it is a life-saving drug. And for drug controller authorities, CDSO, it is a biological substances which require license and permission to produce or to import. And again, for the storage and warehouse people, it is a commodity like a pallet which requires a specific temperature and special handling requirement. So when it comes to the custom clearance, the part one after the transportation of goods for the export purpose, or when the import cargo arrive at the customs, at the customs clearance is needed. And in order to have the faster custom clearance, as Purushottam was asking, what is the method of doing the faster clearance? The best method is the planning. You have to plan your documentation in advance, file the documentation in advance, and in order to avoid any difficulties, verification and scrutiny of the documentation like licenses with the invoice and packing list and the company addresses has to be done properly. Because we have seen there are companies who have got a multiple licenses and multiple entity, and quite often these are exchanged and lead to delay in custom clearances. And when we do such type of activities, the custom clearance is passed through the CDSO or a drug controller authorities, and we need to have a quicker clearances from the CDSO authority. One of the hindrance which comes as a sometimes is the examination of the vaccine. Whether it's an export cargo or import cargo, examination is a difficult activity because you can't expose vaccine in the situation where there is no facility to control the infection in case it is goes out. So shipper or a consignee is quite worried about it. The only solution for that, for the export purpose, you need to have a self-sealing facility or AUO status. And in such cases, customs department allows you to move your cargo without examination, and you save a lot of time in examination and custom clearances, which is very much needed because all these cargo are under the temperature controlled packaging, active or passive, and time saved saves the life of the packaging and give the comfort level to the shipper and the consignee. Second part is the clearances from the regulator side, which is CDSO. In such case, with our experience, we need a prior intimation to the authorities. Helps your cargo for the faster clearance, because in case they demand a technical information or write up about the product, and you provide them the voluminous information, which takes a lot of time to read and decode. So a prior intimation and information is needed. And also it is important to understand the requirement from the regulator side, because we have seen many a times shipper or consignee provide the information which is not in the order it is expected from that, because the drug authority sees in a particular area their concern whether it is conforming to the requirement of those documentation and regulation or not. So keep all technical write-up and information in such a way that it is conforming to their requirements. When it comes to the carrier requirement, while once the custom clearance is carried out or CDSO requirement are taken care, ensure that the proper DG documentation are in place. The marking, labeling, and packaging requirement of a particular class of dangerous goods 6.2 and related information is in place, like contact information, proper instruction related to the
Kamalji, your internet is very weak. Although you're not on video, but yet your voice is little feeble sometimes.
Should I close my video?
I think Kamalji, if you can just come near to the screen, I think it should be okay.
Is that fine now?
Yeah, better.
So proper instruction related
Even
to the
Mr. Saurabh's
yeah.
Okay,
So
you can continue.
Yeah, proper instruction related to the temperature requirement is very important to all the stakeholders in the line, and it is important to communicate in the fashion they are expected. By just writing in some documentation may not be sufficient, so it is important to inform them in advance what is their requirement and what is their communication protocol. And when it comes to the export of vaccine, it is important to know the overseas infrastructure. As Mr. Laurence indicated, one must know the infrastructure available for them, not only at the point of origin, but also at the point of destination. And selection of carrier is very important. You need to understand which carrier is serving those destinations. In most of the cases, transshipment should be avoided, but it can't be avoided all the time. But at least the carrier which has got a capability and experience of handling such type of cargo in the past is very important. Then comes the important do's and don't of vaccine handling. It is advisable to demand advance document from the shipper and consignee. Many of the service providers are very efficient and confident, but they should not be overconfident about the product. Ensure the documents are in place. The filing of documents should be planned in such a way there should not be a holiday in coming days. Even if there is a holiday or public holiday is coming, the customs authorities or regulator must be informed in advance so that they can extend their support if they have the facility to support the handling. Second important thing is identify the scope of work properly, what you are expected to do, and this can be identified by proper communication with the shipper and consignee and understanding the Incoterms, purchase order, conditions mentioned in the letter of credit. And while doing this, it is important to advise your shipper for even those cases which are not, which are those scope which is not the part of your scope, because there you can create the difference of your bonding with them, your relationship with them. See what can go wrong with this type of cargo, who is the right agent for a particular thing, who is the right airline for handling such type of cargo. Temperature requirement of package, anyway you will be writing in the documentation, but a proper communication is very much needed. The most important don't is do not assume and presume things, be specific about it. So one of the example is quite often we hear about room temperature or ambient temperature word, but these are not the specific terminology. there has to be a specific temperature range to be mentioned, because room temperature and ambient temperature in Hyderabad, Europe, and various parts of the world varies. Second important thing is, out of your confidence and previous experience, do not violate any of the standard operating procedure of any of the agency in the supply chain. Mind it very well, all these SOPs and the guidelines are made out of various research and previous experiences, and violation may lead to accident. Third important thing is, if you are not confident of handling, you do not have a kind of skillful people or supervisor who knows the job, do not undertake. You can undertake the other general cargo, because this particular cargo is for human consumption. Your mishandling may cost others life. In case by mistake a temperature excursion happen, or some documentation error happens, or delay happens, or mistake happens, do not hide this information. Provide the information to your shipper so that they can take the corrective action. While saving the cost or thinking about the cost saving, do not compromise with the packaging material, because vaccine handling is important. Packaging is an important component of vaccine handling. And do not sign wherever you are not required to be signed, because mishandling will cost you a lot. Laws are very stringent and penalties are very high. And above that, your responsibility toward drug is more than anything else, because these are used for human consumption and human life is of utmost importance. Thank you very much for listening patiently and giving me the opportunity to express my views as a logistics service provider.
Thank you, Mr. Kamal Jain. I think you have covered the touch points of all the clearances process. I think you have started with right from the vaccine meaning till the all the clearance part, as well as on the packaging part. So one thing you mentioned very unique in this vaccine supply chain is the technical write-up. That there where the major problem comes with the PGS to understand if there is not a proper technical write-up, it will be a challenge in clearance process. Plus, on the other side, like just wanted to ask you one question. Maybe it will have a one more clear from the audience point of view. Maybe what do you suggest? Like basically all the points you have covered, and what is that support which we need to collectively work to represent to this PGS to basically simplify this process? Maybe the prior what do you call clearances on this COVID-19 vaccines. Maybe we can look out something like there was an AO kind of a thing wherein that will help, or else there should be a special drive or a joint representation has to be made to reduce these processing time. These documents, yes, you very well right said, we can have these advanced informations, but what is that additional we require to get this faster clearance and a one standard process?
See, with respect to the regulator, consultation is the most important activity which need to be done with them. Reason is the local authorities, whether it's a CDSO or a customs, are binded by certain rules and regulation. So by consultation, we can understand what is their specific requirement, which can reduce the timelines. In case CDSO asks for some technical write-up, if I give them the voluminous load of research, they may say that, okay, let us read them properly, and which will take hours and days. In such situation, we can always ask, what is the critical information which you are looking for? In one of the case, CDSO asked me about write-up on the polypeptide, and my client has given is one of the chain of the polypeptide. They were not happy with such type of polypeptide. They wanted to know about the specific name and the chain or the technical chain of that polymer. So important is a consultation and a communication between the authorities. What is the critical information they are looking for in that particular piece of paper.
Thank you. Thank you. I think you clarified, and I think we also need to work on those lines. Maybe the 12 hours of clearance time, how can we reduce to 6 hours maybe? And maybe we can also look into the clearance on wheels kind of a concept for this temperature sensitive. The moment it comes, is directly offloads and gets X-rayed and gets into the build-up or going into the active or passive. So we are also, as a terminal operator, working on all these processes to where we can improve ourselves and shorten the supply chain time at the holding points, so that we get the major mileage on the passive solution time period. Thank you, Mr. Kamalji. So I think once we have the question and answer session from the audience, maybe we will just connect you. And thank you once again. So now it's a very important another topic, basically on the vaccine carriage by airline and airline requirements and the procedures, which some more insights will be there through our eminent and the experienced panelist, Mr. Narayan Joshi. He is the regional business head and allied aviation. So he has a very rich experience of 25 years, and he has been into the pharma industry for a quite longer time, and he has been the vertical head for specific temperature control pharma verticals from different companies. He was also into the forwarding companies, as well as he was also in one of the carriers on a longer stint working. So he has been also one of the certified CIV certification internal auditor. Plus, he also has lot of experience on the supply chain management, service level agreements, as well as the quality check. So he comes from a very rich background. And I think today in the topic of airline requirements and procedures, he will be maybe adding value to it and giving us a lot of insights. I think now I hand it over to Mr. Narayan Joshi to take it forward.
Yeah, thank you, Purushottam. Thank you, Gubba team, and of course the ACFI team. I think this kind of a forum was a webinar was much needed for all the stakeholders who are involved in handling any kind of a temperature sensitive shipment, and especially the need of the hour, which is the COVID vaccine shipment. So thank you, Ishika, for bringing up the presentation on the screen. Yeah, so in continuation to the presentation made by Mr. Laurence and Mr. Kamal Jain, there were a lot of insights, a lot of key information which are very important for all of us to make note and to ensure that we put everything together. So in this presentation, Ishika, can we move to the next slide, please? Yeah. So in this presentation, I would like to definitely tell you about my objective to the audience, that how I would like to see, how I would like the audience to perceive what I'm trying to say is, it is a matter of saving life. Of course, it is a COVID vaccine, and whatever best we can do, we should do from our end. And our objective is to ensure that people are aware of what kind of challenges, what kind of requirements are there. People are cautious about what are they going to handle, what is it that they are going to commit to the customer, to the pharma companies, ultimately all these commitments that we make to each other in the supply chain management team is actually an unseen commitment which goes to the ultimate patient. So we have to be very cautious, very alert, very clear, and very focused on what we are doing, what we want to do. And once we are able to put all these together, I think it will be a good opportunity, a good effort to deliver to the need of the hour. So with this, I would move on to the next slide, where I will tell you briefly about my agenda today. Of course, I knew that we are primarily talking about carriage of vaccine by air, and we have a lot of eminent speakers. We will have a lot of similar points coming in this presentation, but there was something which I felt is there is a human touch which we all need to understand. So I will I'll do a quick brief on the overview of the coronavirus, the purpose of vaccine carriage by air, airline requirements and procedures, that is, the various types of service levels, the packaging technology, the risk factors. There are critical control points, and of course, last but not the least, the quality management system. And then we'll summarize this to arrive at a common understanding with the attendees. So next slide, please, Ishita. Yeah. So talking about the coronavirus, like Laurence specified, that we all are so much educated with the Google platform, with the IT platform. There are so many medias which has given us a lot of input about various types of viruses that have been, affecting the livelihood of each and every family. So there is a large family of viruses which is causing respiratory infection in humans. And it is ranging from a common cold to severe respiratory syndrome. There are lots of symptoms that have been defined under the coronavirus. If you look at the kind of symptoms, you may feel that these are very normal symptoms. These are just the cough and the cold or loss of taste, which is nothing new. It has happened in the past also, but it was definitely not as severe as a respiratory syndrome. So what was the outcome when this virus spread into the globe? It was a disaster to the global economy. The entire globe struggled. Everywhere there were lockdowns in every country. Lots of people suffered. Lots of people lost lives, lost their livelihood. So overall, the disaster was, I think, much bigger than what we could imagine, or whatever information that we have gathered. So in order to come through this disaster, it is the major pharmaceutical companies, the vaccine manufacturers, who stepped up to produce vaccines which could cure this kind of disease. And parallelly, WHO introducing all the safety measures, making sure they gave the global direction to each and every, trying to reach out to each and every individual to take on the safety measures which would help them stay safe. So one of them was, like, stay home, stay safe. But the primary thing was, wear your mask, make sure that, you are wearing a clean mask, make sure you're washing your hands, make sure you are hygienic, you're not passing on, the bad breath to the other people. If you protect yourself, you are protecting others from getting affected. So by and large, there are seven Indian pharmaceutical companies who are working on developing the vaccine. Most of you are aware. I don't need to name them, but yes, what I would like to say is the DCGI, that is Director Drugs Control General of India, they have already given the EUA, that is Emergency Use Authorization nod, to the Covaxin of Bharat Biotech and Covishield of Oxford AstraZeneca, which is being manufactured by Serum Institute. And this is where, we all are coming together, that the vaccines are the need of the hour. We need to make sure that we transport it properly. We need to make sure that it reaches to the ultimate patient in a very safe and secure mode. And if they recover, if they see the benefits of this vaccine, obviously the God's blessing falls on all of us. So our goal is, let's do it the right way. Ishika, the next slide, please. Yeah. So now, one of the key point is vaccines carriage by air. Why do we need to carry by air? I mean, everybody knows the answer. We are aware that, the fastest mode of transportation to reach any destination is by air. So that's one of the key points, that, airline are the ones who are from the chosen lot to ensure that, they are able to reach to the destination the fastest. There is a safe and secure mode of transportation, which means the airline will take all safety and security measures to ensure that the efficacy of the product is maintained, the handling are in order, so that we don't have any challenges, we don't see any failures. And of course, from an airline perspective, it is very important for the airline to know that whether the vaccine has been packed in suitable refrigerant materials. So if those processes are correct, it is a situation where we are together moving towards a win-win situation. As we see the vaccines reaching to the respective destinations across the globe, there is a hope that there will be a faster recovery of humans from this virus. Which will lead to people getting back to work, which will lead people to come back to normalcy. And as you know, that since the pandemic, since the lockdown, if among so many industries that were impacted, the worst hit was the service industry. And the various verticals under the service industry, like the aviation, the hotels, lots of other verticals, were all severely hit, and there were a lot of job losses across the globe. Now, these are not good signs, these are not good things, because there are for decades the global stakeholders are working on making sure that unemployment percentage ratio comes down. And now here we have a scenario where everything has turned upside down. So we now see a tremendous percentage of increase of unemployment. So these are efforts that we need to make as an airline operator, and for us to deliver to that speed, to the safety and security, we need to all stakeholders, we need to come together and let's make things forward. Ishika, next slide. Yeah. So coming straight to the point now, we're talking about the airline requirements and procedures. So there are a couple of headings which I chose. I mean, there were many of them, but I think the key ones I'm going to talk about here with everyone. So one of them is service levels. Now, when I say service levels, it's basically not how you feel when you get onto the aircraft, and how you are greeted when you go to the airport. How is your cargo treated when the cargo reaches the airport? It's not just that bit of it. It is every carrier, they have a different service offering designed for certain type of cargo. As a carrier, we accept different types of commodities, even perishables like the fruits and vegetables. There are live animals. There are various other types of products which are transported, and every product has a different service offering. So we have to see that we have to come together, the shippers, the service providers, the warehouse operators, the ground handlers, the airlines, everybody have to come together. We have to sit across on a round table to understand what are the requirements of the shipper for the transportation of the goods. A shipper A may have a requirement which is defined as under certain criteria, but a shipper B may have a slightly different requirement. But for an airline, it is a very complex situation to have a different service level for shipper A and a different service level for shipper B. So what happens? Like every organization, airlines also have the SOPs which define who does what and when. The SOP generally provides an overview of what will be done and who will be responsible for ensuring it is done. The regulatory guidelines, we spoke about the GDP, the WHO, various other such regulatory bodies which are trying to encourage the right mode of transportation, the right service levels. So all of that put together, it is imperative that we as stakeholders, irrespective of our role, come together, understand the requirement, and then act upon it. Like right in the beginning, when, just a key point to highlight, Mr. Laurence was very clear that, there were a couple of dry runs which were performed. The whole idea of performing a dry run was to ensure that are we able to deliver what is required or not. We should not overcome it and under deliver. So that's a very valid point, very deep thought. And when you can't do something, I think it's better, like Kamal also said, it's better to raise your hand and say, no, I can't do it, rather than saying a yes and not able to do it. So with this, to talk a little on the packaging technology, there are different types of packaging systems. Most commonly, we know are about the active and the passive packaging technologies. Almost all the airlines are tied up with the active packaging technology providers. And for the passive packaging also, there are few with whom airlines are tied up. But over and above this, there are multiple options available for passive packaging packaging solutions. Now, it is the shipper who can make a choice of what type of packaging they want to use, depending on the product requirement, depending on the quality team, the quality checks that have been performed, and also how will it be handled throughout the journey from my production plant to the ultimate consumer. And when all these happen, when a shipper takes a decision, again, coming back to the same point, the airline should be informed about the timelines and the sustainability of the packaging solution. And all this can happen, when a shipper does a proper risk assessment, and so do the other stakeholders who also are equally responsible to do a proper risk assessment. So we'll talk a little more as we get on to the next slides. We'll definitely highlight on the points. Ishika, next one, please. Yeah. So now, the risk assessment, as I mentioned. So what are the risk factors? And when an airline accepts a particular cargo, which requires a temperature control system, which is a time-bound shipment, there are lots of risk factors which are involved, and these are very, very critical when it comes to discussion on the table. You can imagine that if such key points are not discussed and a product is moved, and if one of the risk factors plays a vital role, what kind of impact it will lead to. These are very high value products and nobody wants to mess around with it. So the risk factors are, the time and the ambient temperature. So from point A to point B, when an airline is flying, it definitely halts somewhere. It picks up the cargo at the origin, it halts at the transit, and then it reaches a final destination. So during the entire transit, there are multiple handlings involved, and there are the ambient temperatures across those different transit points are different. And in order to mitigate the risk of impact of ambient temperature, what are the infrastructure available? Something like, the other thing is about the missed flights. So, when you are processing your shipment, the documents through your customs, through the customs formality, through security, and if there's some kind of a delay, or probably in the transit, an act of God or something which causes a flight cancellation or a rerouting or something, there is a missed flight, there are change in flight plans, there is an impact of weather, There are holidays, when your cargo, especially when it is time bound and when it reaches destination, and unfortunately, if it reaches destination on a weekend or a holiday, it becomes a little difficult until and unless there's a advance planning done for clearing those cargo. There are strikes, and there is also something like the improper packaging. So if the quality of packaging is not proper, obviously there will be an impact on the efficacy of the product. Extreme temperatures at the warehouse or the truck or tarmac, etc. These are some key risk factors which impact the efficacy of the product ultimately, and no one other than the shipper is primarily held responsible because of this challenge, while the other stakeholders are responsible to make sure that we have our processes in place up to the mark, but it is ultimately the shipper who faces the entire challenge. In order to also cover up on the risk factors, there is something called critical control points. Now, this is a very vital heading to think about, because when we can jot down a huge list of risk factors, we can jot down a huge list of service failures, etc. But when we talk about the critical control points, it is something which we need to definitely draw our attention towards. So one of the primary critical control point, or CCP in short, as we call it, is the route analysis by the shipper. So a route analysis, excuse me, route analysis is not only how an airline flies from point A to point B, but it starts from the plant where the product was manufactured, where the product was produced. How it was produced, what were the parameters, what were the temperature control systems, who takes that cargo from their plant onto the airport, whether it's the road feeder service or any other type of service, who handles the cargo upon arrival at the cargo terminal, how does it get built up for the flight, and how does it get into the flight, and then how does it arrive destination. So a route analysis is one of the key factors for a shipper to ensure that they are making a correct choice of carrier. The other thing is about the product, the package preconditioning. So when you now, I mean, we can definitely elaborate a lot on this, but then to be precise, you say I think I can explain this to you with an example that, when you buy an ice cream from the store, you bring it home and you have a brand new refrigerator and you put it in the freezer and then switch on the refrigerator. Obviously, your refrigerator is not preconditioned to maintain the ice cream, the required temperature for the ice cream. So you have to have your refrigerator preconditioned well in time, well before time, so that when you put your package in, you are using the correct method, you are using the correct process. The temperature mapping. So this is again, the product temperature, the transit points, ambient temperature conditions. These are very critical aspects of mapping, so that you get an in-depth analysis of what you can expect. Something very critical again is proper labeling. So the labeling is usually as per the IATA standards and the DGCA regulations, because we need to adhere to these guidelines purely as an aviation sector. There are limitations when the aircraft is flying 30,000, 40,000 feet above in the air, and it is very critical to have these labelings correct. The product loading acceptance. So, when all the processes are completed by the shipper and the cargo reaches up to the cargo terminal, it is the terminal operator who accepts the cargo. And for the acceptance, they also have to review, they also have to check the packaging. They also have to check what is the instruction on the packaging, make sure that it is meeting the service requirement, the ground transportation, the warehousing. Once the cargo is built up, it is ready for shifting it, transferring it to the aircraft. Then, how are we moving it from the warehouse up to the aircraft and then into the aircraft hold? So the entire process has a lot of challenges across and a lot of important aspects which we need to really focus on, and we need to make sure that all these things are discussed with the shippers, with the manufacturers, so that they are aware of such challenges and they propose necessary solutions. Ishika, the next slide, please. Yeah. Okay. So as like I mentioned in the beginning, that this is not the last, and not the least, quality management system. Obviously, our friend Laurence mentioned, Kamal mentioned that the need for written procedures and specifications are a must. So the SOP and SLA, that is a service level agreement, these are primary requirements to ensure that people who are not a part of the meeting are also aware what they are supposed to do. So that brings us to the individual roles and responsibilities. So like, very randomly, Mr. Laurence mentioned about Mr. Kuttuswamy driving the truck down. But yes, it is the responsibility of Mr. Kuttuswamy to ensure that the truck is operating in the correct process. But ultimately, the shipper doesn't want to know what Mr. Kuttuswamy says. Shipper wants to see what data is available, what has happened, whether everything went right or there was something which needs attention. Something like another QMS is the corrective action and the preventive action. In short, we know this term as CAPA. Okay, so a corrective action and preventive action will tell us that whether there was an opportunity to take a corrective, to do a correction, or going forward, what are the preventive action that can be taken. Training programs, of course, one of the key aspect of our airline requirements and procedures. Everybody needs to be trained. Everybody needs to know what they are supposed to do, and it should be documented. Proper calibration systems, like we spoke about the data loggers, the digital data loggers, the lithium usage of lithium batteries, the usage of dry ice. Everything is so vital in this supply chain management of air transportation that it is imperative to have a proper calibration system. So the kind of packaging system we use, has that been calibrated? The measurement tools that we use, have that been calibrated or not? A lot of parameters that need to be covered. The quality matrix, the audit program. If you notice, I have highlighted the audit program because that is the best method to evaluate if we are on track or not. We can always prepare an SOP, we can always prepare an SLA, we can prepare a CAPA, everything can be done. But unless these documents, the processes and the people unless they are audited, we are definitely not going to achieve what we are targeting for. So audit program is one of the key factors of the quality management system. The other aspects are about the deviation management. So deviation from the process or deviation in temperature of the product, the change control procedures, because as and when we move ahead in time, there are lots of changes that come in. There is a DG regulation which keeps getting updated. There are new technologies which are coming in. Lots of change control is required. And finally, again, a management control. So when we look at the entire quality management system, when we look at all the stakeholders in the supply chain management, it is important that we have a proper management control system in place so that things are addressed and taken forward in the right spirit, in the right mindset. Can we get on with the last slide, Ishika? Okay, so this kind of brings me to conclude, to summarize. The transportation of vaccines must comply with the detailed provision of technical instructions. Wherever, if the vaccines are classified under dangerous goods, which means the use of dry ice is involved, or some kind of a cooling material which falls under the dangerous goods categories, or the vaccines are shipped with any other type of refrigerant, even the data loggers, the cargo tracking devices are included in the packages or overpacks. It is very important that these elements are defined specifically and discussed and arrived at a common conclusion that everybody is aware, and we can move forward accordingly. The aviation regulator, that is the DGCA, they also issued guidelines to all the aircraft operators for the transportation of COVID vaccines, especially when it is packed in dry ice to various parts of the countries, as it is very important to take necessary safety precautions and modalities. Usually the vaccine packages will contain multiple items, and to name a few, the vaccine component, the vaccine itself, the data loggers, or the cargo tracking devices powered by lithium batteries that emit electromagnetic rays that have the potential to interfere with the aircraft system. And there is a limitation of the use of the quantity of lithium that is used. There is a limitation on the dry ice quantity that is used. So these are very critical aspects to summarize, but yes, we can always talk about it. We also have to be aware of the regulatory guidelines, like I mentioned earlier, that about the WHO, about the GDP guidelines of handling cargo, warehouse operations, everything, each and every aspect of the regulation is so vital that we need to be really on top of situation to ensure that we deliver what is required by the end customer. Thank you so much. I think that brings me to the end of my presentation. I'm happy to take any questions, any points to discuss.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Narayan. I think you well touched upon on a very micro level on the vaccine carriage by air. There are very critical points which you also mentioned on the CCP and QMS, which are very important and is required for the vaccine supply chain. And also on the SLAs. SLAs are not the standard level agreement SLAs, but you very well said that all the stakeholders should be aligned to handle this. And there's a lot of things which you've spoken about, the route validation and other things and all. So on the CCSP, just to give you a brief, I think as a terminal operator also, we are coming up, we are developing a product which is like a vaccine ledger. It starts from the purchase order level. So it whatever route or whatever mode it is choosing, so it will have a complete traceability, trackability, and the temperature mapping. So that's one thing which is going to come up. And since you have touched upon the very important topic of CC control point, so I just wanted to tell about that. Plus the packaging, protocol which has changed as per the DGCA. So no dry ice is used for the vaccines for this COVID-19. It is only on the gel packs currently which we have seen. And there could be an active and passive solutions which are already in the market. So that's a change in transformation of the protocol of packaging which has come in for the vaccines. That's a good thing. I think the audiences have got a lot of information, micro level, with your in-depth presentation. So thank you very much, Mr. Narayan. So any question or answers will be there. We'll be just taking. We're just running short of time, so we'll take up your questions in the next session. So
Thank
now,
you.
yeah. So now the next topic is basically it's a first mile and the last mile, which is very critical. You do entire journey somewhere, it has to be stored, and after manufacturing, it has to go for some storages. So basically, on the vaccine cold storage and warehousing requirements, we have another distinguished and eminent speaker, Mr. Kiran Gubba, who's the CEO for the Gubba Cold Storage. So he'll be talking about the entire, they are the pioneers in the cold storages. So they were one of the eminent, basically on the seed storages. It was started, I think, way back around 20 years back, and and he's an entrepreneur. Plus, to give his introduction is a very big introduction. He's from Hyderabad, and if you see, he's leading the company Gubba Cold Storage with a lot of branches and very high-tech cold storages with a lot of processes, which today the pharma industry requires. And other thing is they have been very benchmarked in the cold storages. They have brought in a lot of technology innovation. So they have also been basically he was also one of the good speakers on the cold storages we have seen in every forum. And if you see that, he has also been instrumental in creating the Gubba from 0.7 million cubic feet to one of the India's largest, biggest cold storage company with 11 million cubic feet. So that's a great achievement, and that's the biggest like in cold storages in down south. So I would like to hand over now to Mr. Kiran Gubba to take it forward with his presentation. Over to you, Mr. Kiran.
So thank you, Mr. Thakur, and I'll be concise as possible, so that we can take some Q&A at the end. So let me quickly run through my presentation, and yeah, I hope it's visible. Yeah. So yeah, typically this is how typically this is how a single floor cold storage facility looks at. In fact, I have been speaking in various webinars since a year at least, thanks to this COVID. I got an opportunity to speak. There are some 10,000 cold storages in India. And how many cold storages are ready to go for vaccine? The answer was less than 1%, close to 8 months ago. Now, one of the biggest advantage in India we have got in the cold storage system, and also one of the big disadvantage also. One of the big advantages is that India has cold storage facility in every nook and corner, right from Kashmir to Kanyakumari to Gujarat to West Bengal. And that allows the supply chain easy, because most of the products which are stored in India are stored at 228, like either the pulses or the flowers or the fruits or the groceries, all are stored at 228. And luckily, most of the vaccine is again stored at 228. So temperature maintenance is not a problem, but there are many challenges which I will evaluate in my PPT. Yeah, this is how a typical cold storage looks. To have systems in place, yes, you need to have all the ERP-based reports online system, so because especially when vaccine comes, things will be very fast. Like we have already spoken, I mean, a couple of speakers already spoke about the cross-dock solutions, and the high volume which will pick up maybe in the next 1 month. The cold storage industry has to be really agile in having everything in place, like the FIFO and so on. Yeah, and you need to have 21 CFR data loggers, one of the highest ethical data logging system, tamper-proof, transparent data logging system, and that's a must for pharma and of course vaccine. That will allow the client to have 100% trust on the cold storage industry, which you can't tamper the data which is recorded in those data loggers. And already a couple of people already spoke about temperature mapping, thermal tracking. These are the very basic things which the cold storage industry need to gear up to serve pharma and of course vaccine. And there are what you call agencies which have come in recent past to give these reports accurately. And its time has come for the industry to knock and get these reports in place before actually the vaccine arrives to third-party players like us. In any pharma cold storage, this is the products which you can store. You need to have the safety certifications that will allow your systems to get set right, and that will allow you to go for pharma compliant to handle the pharma handling procedures. In fact, we have created our own. I mean, we did speak to a couple of experts and created our own vaccine protocol handling procedures in a cold storage facility, because we did start receiving inquiries 2 months ahead, 2 months before. So we were ready in all respects to accept the vaccine. And it's always good to have regulatories in place. Like there might be some vaccines going forward, maybe if not now, maybe after 6 months or so, you might be also having vaccines coming up from an SEZ or a NUU, and then directly it gets exported to any out of India. In those circumstances, it's always preferred or good to have a regulatory in place such that the client will have the convenience of paying of taxes, etc., etc. I mean, these are the various PP things which the cold storage industry needs to adhere. You need to have change rooms. You need to have a rejected and damaged space. If at all you have any damaged pallets, you need to have a separate place. Yeah, like if you look at how many cold storages are needed, yeah, I mean, nobody has a clarity yet, but at least we have a clarity that most of 90% of the cold storage is vaccine is preserved at 228. And in fact, as Mr. Laurence was saying that, I mean, one of the facility which has 1728 pallets, in fact, sir, we at Gubba are ready with 10,000 pallets of cold storage space, which can go up to 228 and -20. And we need cold storages in smaller villages, towns, tier 1 and tier 2 also, depending on the the size of the population there. We have to create the facilities and make the chambers ready. And needless to mention, you need to be a WHO GDP compliant cold storage facility. That is the critical most. It's like the passport if you have to travel to abroad. So we have already started. We have a All India Cold Storage Association, and in various webinars I've been harping upon to at least make a couple of chambers ready, WHO GDP compliant, such that when the vaccine comes, it will be easy for the freight and forwarders or the airlines or the vaccine manufacturers for plug and play. Yeah, these are the possible temperatures where the COVID vaccine is stored. -20 is again not that much there in India at the moment. Yeah, as I said, these are the various challenges which our industry is facing. We are at 50% of what India needs. We are just half of there. Again, as I said, we need to have a bigger facilities in tier 1, and in towns we need to have a smaller facilities in place and ensure the last mile delivery too. The allied infrastructure to ensure that the last mile delivery. And as such, we at Gubba are ready with a 10,000 pallets facility, which is a pharma and vaccine compliant. Yeah, in fact, I keep telling to the industry, like, I mean, we, the cold storage industry, need to think 5 steps ahead, ahead of the vaccine manufacturers or the freight and forwarders, and give solutions that actually add value. Now, once you see, maybe after a month or so, once you see the gates of the vaccine open, there'll be a lot of chaos, there'll be a lot of confusion. So all the more the industry need to go hand in glove. We need to support each other such that we don't have the teething issues. Initially, we might occur teething issues. Now, if we plan 2 steps forward, if we are proactive in our approach, if we are being that generous more, we will have lesser issues to deal with. Thank you. As I said, I want to be precise, and in my presentation, I want to give more time for the speakers. Thank you. Over to you, Mr. Thakurji.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Kiran. I think you have given a wonderful insights on the cold storages, and you people, the one say that you are 50% of the capacity which the India required. That's itself is a benchmark. And then the other things which you were very critical and you understood your customer requirement very well was the safety, the GDP compliance, the HCCAP compliance to keep the product safe. You got all the certifications, and the transparency of the monitoring systems are very robust with your cold storages. So I think that's a great awareness to the entire audience to know how. And apart from that, you also focused on a dedicated cold storage facility which you are maintaining for the COVID-19 to for upcoming vaccine supply chain. So I think it was a lot of insights from your side. So now I think once again, thank you, Mr. Kiran. I think taking us through the entire ecosystem of the cold storages in a very precise manner. And I think we had a very good panelists which have given their presentations and a lot of information which is required for this vaccine handling as a process, best practices, and the requirements. So I I think we can request now for open forum for the question and answers, which are very important for us. So I can see in a chat box, there is one question from anonymous attendee. So it was like, does any of the vaccines need long time storage? What's the lifetime of vaccine? What's the lifetime of COVID-19 vaccine? Is there any need to know the stability of vaccines by the agencies involved in supply chain? Is there any need to use cloud technology in assessing the so-called safety of vaccine, efficacy of vaccines? So I would like to give it this question to the panelist from the airline's perspective. If you can, to Laurence sir or Mr. Narayan, if you can just take up this question.
Sure. Hello? Purushottam, can you hear me?
Yes, you are audible, sir.
Yeah, you. Yes.
Okay. Do we need long-term storage for vaccines? The answer would be partially no, because the shipper would like to transport it within the shortest transit time frame. Secondly, the shelf life of the vaccine varies from vaccine to vaccine, and the customer would like to have the longest period of the vaccine at the destination. So the requirement of storage at this point of time is not really required. Is there any need to use cloud technology in assessing the so-called safety of the vaccine? Technology for tracking for the various parameters that affect the vaccine is required, parameters like humidity, shock, temperature, etc. Does it affect the efficacy of the vaccine? Only the manufacturer can tell you that.
Right.
That's my partial answer.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. If anybody would like to give any information on that, or we can go to the next question, open to the forum. If anybody has any other questions, you can just raise your hand, or you can just put it in the chat box. Anybody would like to have any more questions? So, any questions from the audience? Any specific question?
Yeah, there is one. Mr. Rajesh Ramchandani has raised hand.
Okay. Ishika, can you just give him the control?
And also Mr. Tulsi Prasad.
Done.
Yes, very good afternoon. I hope I'm audible.
Yeah, very much. Yeah.
Well, so thank you. Firstly, thank you for organizing this and also, kind of linking up with many of us really for us to be on this call for the last hour and 40 minutes. So thank each and every speaker who's kind of shared their thoughts. My very specific question is largely to anyone from the airlines on this panel here. In terms of excursions, really, uh, and I'm obviously putting that to contrast with what happens on the ocean side of our businesses, is that whenever there is a deviation or an excursion, uh, there is a lot of reluctance really in terms of a lot of data sharing that most organizations or asset-based players have. So any of your panelists, would they, kind of shed more light in terms of, is it something similar on the airline side, or is it more of a protocol that the minimum amount of information that needs to be shared is the best information? So that's largely my question.
Okay, Mr. Rajesh. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, Laurence. Yeah.
Sorry, Rajesh, one quick answer to your question is, it depends on what equipment is being used to measure the excursions. If it is shipper specific, it's a particular data logger, then the customer needs to download the data. If it's information that is shared, unlike ocean freight, the question of a data logger during the flight does not transmit data simply because of security protocol. Whereas in ocean freight, at all times, it will be transmitting data. There are periods where the data loggers do not transmit data. It's also the choice of the shipper what type of data logger to use. Is that information shared with the carrier or the transporter? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. And it's not only the excursion, it is the duration of the excursion that matters, and depending on the stability of the product. So is the airline willing to share? Most airlines share it on their website, in whatever it is, whatever data is available. Does that answer your question?
Yes, partially sure, Mr. Laurence. I guess what you're saying is, unlike ocean, air doesn't have the basic availability of information at all times on account of security protocols, as you mentioned. But as far as airline corporation is concerned, it's far more, is what you're saying, than what we see on ocean side. Really,
I have no idea about ocean, so I can't make a comparison. But I know that airlines are quite willing to share the data. The problem is the data is downloaded and shared with the carrier much later from the data logger. When the aircraft takes off, the time it lands is a null period where very few data loggers are allowed to transmit during the flight.
Yeah,
I
think
got that.
allow me to add a little more over here. Somewhere, I think all of the speakers spoke about the active packaging solution and the passive packaging solution. So, I completely agree with what Mr. Laurence specified, that, as long as the product is being transported by air, that is a null period. Also, there is some bit of opportunity to track the temperature, but that is only possible when the customer chooses to use an active packaging solution, active temperature control solution, where the equipment itself has a display screen to display the temperatures. But that gives you a very close understanding of whether the temperature inside the unit is performing to the expectation or not. But it definitely doesn't tell you what exactly the product is undergoing. So there is a difference between a passive packaging solution where there is a completely null period, and the shipper will only get to know after they receive the goods and after the data from that data logger is downloaded. And there is an active temperature control packaging solution where at least you can look at the display screen at regular intervals as per the SOP, and then share that with the customer. So there is a thin line which differentiates between the two.
Well, thank you, Mr. Joshi.
Okay. Yeah. Any other question from the audience?
Yeah, there is one question, sir, about yeah, in the chat, in the Q&A.
I have just answered that, Kiran. I think he is asking about the 30 PMCs for a freighter. Yes, we can handle, and we are enhancing our 228 built-up positions by having additional cool cells. And definitely this will be an active or a passive solution, so that we can cater through our terminal. That's not a problem.
Yeah, Mr. Venkata Rao Ramarao wants to speak. He wants to, I mean, he has a question.
Hi, am I audible?
Yeah, very much, Ramarao.
It is not a question, but I just want to add a few points to question raised on data sharing and the data loggers for air transportation. A while ago, a gentleman was asking. Basically, the data loggers, what goes into air transportation are have to be certified by FAA, Federal Aviation Authority. Unlike shipping, Federal Aviation Authority, any manufacturing company who's doing the data loggers have to present their data loggers with their prototypes and technicalities, and you need to have a clear certification by FAA before you present it for commercialization and marketing it. This is one important thing, because why airline cannot share the information. I mean, most of the information, what customer is seeking with reference to when it is consumer traveling in sea, is only because of the restrictions levied by FAA. I also want to add one more important thing. All the set of data loggers what are in use right now are going to go vanish very soon. Soon a very smart, crisp and very handy, very dynamic data loggers are going to come up. Some of the manufacturers have already placed their requests for clearances with FAA. These data loggers are going to give you an online tracking wherever 2G or 3G is available. They are going to be very, very small data loggers, and that's going to solve a big problem for the shippers. So the reason why a shipper is asking for data transfer while it is in the air also, because what happens, so far whatever the data loggers what we have in hand are only helping to do a postmortem job. Cargo has to reach the destination, consign is placed, then he'll take out the data logger from the consignment and put it into the customer computer, then download the data. By then, if something went wrong, the damage is already done. Now these new smart, new generation data loggers, which are expected very soon, are going to be allowed by FAA also for transmitting while in the air, which will not disrupt any of the aviation aircraft movement, while it is safely transferring the data. And this will help the shippers and airlines, freight forwarders to identify if there is any excursion at a particular point of transit point. We'll find it out, and then these data are actually shared to the shipper, the owner of the consignment, the freight forwarder, anyone else who's authorized, so they can identify the excursion or incursion occurring at a particular transit point, and then they stop it. So there is no postmortem occurs. I hope I tried answering your question clearly. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Venkat Raman.
Thank you, Venkat Raman. And I think the technology is going beyond also. I think maybe in future, there will be an entire alert system mechanism wherein the aircraft data can also be looked into. So that this is under the exploration stage. So maybe I think there will be a much more advanced technology will be available going forward. So any other questions we have from the audience? Anybody? Anybody would like to have any question Q&A session?
I think, yeah, Guru, we can move towards the end then.
Yeah, okay. So thank you, all the distinguished panelists. I think it was a wonderful information and the insights shared by you all. I think, and it was a great, what do you call, information which our audience have also got it. And this was the awareness which was required, and through the ACFI, GMR Hyderabad, Cargo and Gubba cold storage, we could able to organize. And I hope it was benefited to all the stakeholders who have joined virtually. So I now request and Mr. Kiran Gubba, CEO Gubba Cold Storage, to give the vote of thanks.
So thank you. And first of all, thank all the panelists who were crisp and ending the webinar on time, in fact, ahead of time, and which is pretty rare in today's world. Yeah, thanks for sticking to the timelines and yet creating value. First of all, I want to thank ACFI President Mr. Saurabh Kumar for your initiative of this vaccine webinar at a right time where we need to express that we, the Hyderabad and India, are ready to administer the vaccine across India and world. Thank you, sir. Thank you for your inputs, and thank you for your initiation. And thank you all the speakers, thank you, Mr. Purushottam Singh, for your moderation. And I could see you have answered quite a few questions live there. Thank you for your agility. And thank you, Mr. Kamal Jain. Thank you, Mr. Narayan Joshi, Mr. Laurence Jacobi, for your time and adding value to the whole session. And thank you, Gubba team, for making this flawless arrangements. In fact, we had close to 90 odd people in the participation today. And yeah, of course, for people who have missed the webinar, we are going to send the recording such that you can have go through the recording. And thank you all for your time, and stay safe. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks to all of you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.